So the title for my sermon talk, address, however we want to call it, it's attending to the whole in times of fragmentation. I had an interesting experience because I had just, when I was talking to Harriet about this talk, I was just teaching this multi-part workshop at the seminary where I teach, and it was called Attending to the Whole in This Time of Fragmentation. But when I wrote an email to her, I just made a slight change and changed the in this time of fragmentation to in times of fragmentation. I didn't know why I did that then. It was just something that I felt like I wanted to do. And it was only through the last few weeks that this has really come alive for me, that slight change in the title. And to a large extent, it is because I came across this book that I'm reading right now. The book is called We Survived the End of the World, Lessons from Native America on Apocalypse and Hope. It's written by Stephen Charleston, who is a Choctaw Indian, belongs to the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and is also a retired Episcopal bishop and an academic. So he holds multiple identities and speaks from this deep, deep experience of the indigenous population of this country. And he says this is not the first apocalypse we're facing. Human beings have lived through many apocalypses, and we are here to tell the story. And I know many of our ancestors have lived through apocalypses too. And I'm here to tell the story, and we are here to tell the story. So I'm grateful that I did not stay with just this apocalypse and expanded it to the human experience. One of the first things that Stephen Charleston does in this book is he goes to the etymology of the word apocalypse. So from the Greek root, it's composed of two words, apo and kalyptin. So apo is on or off or away, O-F-F, off or away, and kalyptin is to cover or conceal. So apocalypse literally means to uncover or to reveal. Let's take that in. And he says, it's so beautiful. He says, apocalypse is a term that describes both what is already happening and a vision of what is to come. And we are here today partly because we are called to hold that vision of what is to come and not just surrender to what is happening. So this definition, this understanding of apocalypse, and of course, the title of the book is it's called We Survived the End of the World, Lessons from Native America on Apocalypse and Hope. So the name of the book ends with hope. And that's hopefully the trajectory that we can traverse today. But I want to start with fragmentation. I want to start with what we are feeling right now, because sweeping it under the carpet does no good to anybody. What is fragmentation for you? How do you feel fragmentation in your psyche, in your body? For me, when I think of fragmentation, I often think of an explosion. And I see at the very edges of this explosion, red hot material, anger, frustration, a desire, and not even a desire, a urge to change something now. That's at the periphery of my experience of fragmentation. Then there's this next layer that is kind of this seething space. I sometimes think of it as like acid burn. It's under the surface and it hurts, it burns, but it's often not visible. And then at the very, very center where the explosion happened, it feels like the Dementor sucked life out of that place. It feels dead, it feels numb. And there are places in me right now that are numb, where feeling cannot go because it hurts too much. How do you experience your fragmentation today? With what's happening in the world, with what's happening in this country, with what's happening to Mother Earth? What is that experience? Hold just a few seconds of silence as we honor that place, the charnel ground. That cemetery. I was driving in with Harriet earlier, and she was remembering protests of the 60s. One of the sentences she said, I'm paraphrasing, is we didn't march for this to happen today. Feel that heartbreak. So there are two things that are working me right now. And I always like to speak from the place where I am raw, because that's where the living material is. So the two things that are working me, one of them is this HBO miniseries that we watched over the past week. It's called Chernobyl. And it's a docudrama about what happened in Chernobyl. And one of the things that I did not really appreciate the extent of what were the different steps, the step by step of leading to that explosion of the nuclear reactor that could have been stopped at so many different steps had people stopped lying, had people stopped catering to what the Central Committee wanted, look for their own promotion, pleasing their boss, until there came the point where it was irreversible. And today we have 2,000 plus acres of land, which is going to remain radioactive for the next 24,000 years in uninhabitable. It could have been stopped. It could have been stopped had somebody had the courage in time to tell the truth. And there were many somebodies who could have done it. So I'm holding that as an experience of fragmentation in our culture, in our time. And there is something else I'm holding, which is kind of interesting that it happened in this way. There's an exhibition that's going on in MoMA, in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it's going to go until late summer, I believe, or early fall. It's this Black artist. His name is Jack Whitten. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the correct information. Yes, his name is Jack Whitten. And the exhibition is called The Messenger. And on the MoMA website, it describes Jack Whitten as an artist who created visionary beauty from righteous anger. He was a Black man who grew up in segregated Alabama, who met Dr. King, participated in civil rights activism in Montgomery, and then in 1960 decided that as a Black man, his future was non-existent if he stayed in the South. So he moved to New York City, he moved to the Village. And from 1960 to his death in 2018, for 6 decades, he created art in New York City. And his art was influenced by Dr. King. His art was influenced by jazz musicians, a lot of them, Miles Davis, among one of the big ones. His art was influenced by the 1980s AIDS epidemic in the Village, and then the 9/11. And he was a really like a experimenter. His studio was like a lab. And every decade he found a new way of expressing his art. But the part that speaks to me the most of all his work is this period in the 1970s, for the most part, where he was working with acrylic. What he would do is he would have these huge canvases, and he mixed different kinds of acrylic himself. So he would make the acrylic like congeal at different rates, dry at different rates. He would add things that would add shimmer or glow, and he would put objects under the acrylic. So as it dried, it would have these uneven shapes, including a wire hanger, pieces of rock. And then he developed this carpenter's tool where he would attach, so it was like a big T, it's like a 12-foot T, and he would attach it to it, things like blades or African combs or squeegees, and he would drag it over these layers of acrylic. So what happened was that the top layers would kind of split open, crack open, and you would see the inner layers of dried acrylic. And I mean, you can see these pieces of art on MoMA website, but if you can, go see it in person, because there's something about the 3-dimensionality of the work that is just unbelievable. You literally feel like this is this man's psyche that you're looking at. And he's digging into, he's excavating what is radioactive in his psyche, what has been covered over by the later layers of acrylic. And isn't our psyche like that? Isn't this nation's psyche like that, where a lot of radioactivity has been buried? And just the edges of some of the stuff that he's cracked open, like there is one that he did after Dr. King was assassinated, and it is in memoriam of Dr. King, and it literally has this pieces of acrylic being pulled out, and inside there's this newspaper covering. It's just extraordinary. But what also really, this is a piece of art where these are huge canvases, and I found myself like going very close, looking at the cracks up close, and then moving back and taking in the whole view, and doing that several times. And then as I have sat with this art over the last week, where I've been drawn to is actually a surgical technique called debridement. You know, if you have a deep wound and it's scabbed over, then the first thing that you want to do is to actually remove that scab so that the infection underneath can be treated with antibiotics or whatever you need to do so that it can heal. Otherwise, the infection will spread into the blood and you have sepsis and you die. what are the wounds in our culture that we need to debride? Where do we need antibiotics? And specifically, what is mine to do? Not every wound is mine to heal, but which is the wound that's mine to heal? It might be just what's in my psyche. It might be people who are right around me, my children, my friends, my neighbors, or it could be bigger. But let us not run away from the raging infection. So that's fragmentation. Doesn't feel great. But what I want to do, remember that the title was attending to the whole in this time of fragmentation. I want to remind us that culture after culture after culture, tradition after tradition after tradition has told us that all this fragmentation is temporal. It's in this time, in this space. And then there's a larger whole that cannot be touched, that can never be broken. I want to end my presentation today with a chant from my tradition. I grew up in India, and it is a peace chant. It's called Shanti Mantra. And I'll give you the translation first, and then I'll chant it for you. The translation is, that is full. You can say that is whole. That is full. This is full. From fullness arises fullness. And if you take away fullness from fullness, only fullness remains. That is full. This is full. From fullness arises fullness. And if you take away fullness from fullness, only fullness remains. And this is the chant. Om Purnam Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And I leave you with this blessing from Jan Richardson, who's a poet and an ordained minister. The beautiful prayer feels very applicable for now. These are her words. Now more than ever, let us be the ones who will not turn away. Let us be the ones who will go farther into the wreck and deeper into the rubble. Let us be the ones who will enter into the places of devastation beyond belief and despair beyond our imagining. And there, let us listen for the spirit that brooded over the formless darkness. And there, let us look again for the God who gathered up the chaos and began to create. Let us be the ones who will give ourselves to the work of making again and to the endless beginning of creation.